Imagine a hunter from 40,000 years ago dropped into a supermarket at midnight. The lights hum overhead, endless and white. Rows of food stretch farther than any eye can see. More meat and fruit and grain than his entire clan could gather in a lifetime. He would not walk calmly down the aisle. He would probably fall to his knees, because to him, this isn't a store. It's a miracle, or a trap, or both. That's the question worth sitting with. What would prehistoric people actually think if they saw the world we live in now? Not the movie version, not cavemen gawking at cars for laughs. A real reaction, shaped by minds built for survival, danger, and community. Some parts of our life would look like paradise to them. Other parts would look like sickness. And figuring out which is which tells us something uncomfortable about the world we've built. Let's set the scene properly. For most of human history, life was lived in small bands, 20 to 50 people, moving with the seasons, sleeping in shifts, watching the tree line for movement that shouldn't be there. Food was never guaranteed. Warmth was never guaranteed. A cut on the leg could kill you in a week if it turned bad. That was normal. That was simply what being alive meant. So when we ask what a person from that world would think of ours, we're not asking a small question. We're asking how a mind trained for scarcity and threat would process a world built on convenience and safety. On this channel, Prehistoric People, we like digging into exactly this kind of collision between the ancient brain and the modern world, because the gap is bigger and stranger than most people realize. The first thing that would hit our visitor is not technology. It's not phones or cars. It's silence from fear. Picture walking outside at night today. No predator is waiting in the dark. No rival group is watching your fire, deciding whether tonight is the night to attack. For a prehistoric person, that absence would be almost impossible to process. Their entire nervous system was tuned to threat. Every rustle in the grass a possible death. Take that threat away completely, and something strange happens. The constant background hum of danger just stops. Some researchers who study hunter-gatherer psychology believe this alone would feel less like relief and more like disorientation, like a sound you've heard your whole life suddenly going quiet. If you've ever wondered how differently the ancient brain reads the world compared to ours, stick around, because it only gets stranger from here, and Prehistoric People has plenty more of this waiting for you. Now picture the food. Our hunter isn't just impressed by the supermarket, he's confused by it. Prehistoric humans thought about food constantly because it was never far from running out. Feast and famine weren't concepts, they were the rhythm of life. A big kill meant days of eating well and sharing with the group. A bad season meant weeks of hunger, of children crying, of elders quietly eating less so the young could survive. So imagine showing that person a place where food never runs out, where you can have meat every single day, where fruit is available in the dead of winter. At first, it would look like the greatest fortune imaginable. But give that person a week in modern life, and a second reaction would creep in: suspicion. Why does no one seem grateful? Why do people leave food on their plates and throw it away? In a world where hunger was the enemy that killed people they loved, wasted food wouldn't just look wasteful, it would look almost offensive, a kind of forgetting that the ancestors never could have afforded. Here's where the story takes its first real turn, because comfort and health don't move together the way you'd expect. Our prehistoric visitor would be floored by modern medicine, genuinely floored. Childbirth killing far fewer mothers. Infections that once meant a slow, painful death, now cured with a small pill in days. Broken bones that once meant permanent limping, now reset and healed clean. To someone from a world where a simple infection could wipe out a third of a group in a bad season, this would look like sorcery in the best possible sense. Lifespans that once rarely stretched much past 40 now regularly reach 80. That part of modern life would earn nothing but awe. But then comes the twist nobody expects. Our visitor starts noticing the people around them, really watching how they move and live day to day, and the awe turns into something closer to alarm. Why does that man struggle to walk up a single flight of stairs? Why are so many people breathing heavy just from standing? In a hunter-gatherer's world, every single day involved miles of walking, climbing, carrying, tracking. Physical weakness wasn't just uncommon, it was often a death sentence, because a body that couldn't move, couldn't eat, and couldn't run. So a visitor from that world, looking at a species that invented machines to move people distances of a few hundred feet, machines to open jars, machines to do almost everything the human body used to do out of daily necessity, wouldn't see convenience. They'd see a body forgetting what it was built for. And if this kind of contrast is interesting to you, this is exactly the kind of thing we dig into on Prehistoric People. So it's worth sticking around and subscribing, because the story only gets more surprising from this point on. Let's talk about something even harder to explain to someone from 40,000 years ago: loneliness in a crowd. Our visitor grew up in a group where you were almost never physically alone. You slept near others. You ate with others. Decisions were made together, because survival depended on cooperation, not individual effort. Now put that same person in a city of 10 million, watching people scroll through their phones on a crowded train. Nobody speaking, nobody making eye contact. Each person sealed inside their own small bubble in the middle of a sea of others. This might be the single hardest thing to explain, not because it's complicated, but because it makes no evolutionary sense to a prehistoric mind. More people than they've ever seen in one place, and yet somehow, more isolated than anyone in their own small band ever was. Their group of 30 knew each other completely, relied on each other completely, and never doubted their place within it. A modern city dweller can live beside the same neighbor for 10 years and never learn their name. To ancient eyes, that isn't independence. That looks like a kind of quiet wound. Here's a question worth throwing out to you directly. If a prehistoric person had to choose between our safety and comfort, or their tight, familiar community where everyone knew their role, which do you think they'd pick? Drop your answer in the comments, because the responses on this exact question tend to split people right down the middle, and it says a lot about what we actually value versus what we think we value. Something else would confuse our visitor just as deeply: the pace. Everything about prehistoric life moved with the seasons, with sunrise and sunset, with the slow rhythm of tracking, gathering, resting, repeating. There was urgency, certainly, when danger appeared or when a hunt demanded it. But daily life had long stretches of quiet, of sitting, of simply being present, because there was nowhere else to be, and nothing else that needed doing right that second. Drop that same person into a modern office, watching people stare at screens for 8, 9, 10 hours straight, rushing between meetings, checking messages every few minutes, eating lunch at their desk while still working. To prehistoric eyes, this wouldn't look like productivity. It would look like a strange kind of trap, work without an obvious end, without an obvious reward, disconnected from anything you could touch, hunt, build, or eat. They gathered food to eat that same week. We often work for money to pay for things we won't see or use for months. That disconnect between effort and reward, so normal to us, might be one of the strangest things they'd witness. And then there's the sky. Ancient humans knew the stars the way we know street names. They tracked seasons by constellations, predicted weather by cloud patterns, read the land like a language, because their lives depended on it. Take our visitor to a modern city and have them look up at night, and they might see almost nothing. Light pollution erasing a sky that once guided entire migrations. It's a small detail, but it would probably hit them harder than the buildings or the traffic. Losing the sky would feel like losing a language they'd spoken their entire life, and it captures something bigger about modern life. We've gained control over almost everything, but in the process, we've lost fluency in the natural world our ancestors read like a book. So what would the final verdict be? Probably not simple admiration, and probably not simple pity either. It would likely be something more complicated. Genuine awe at the medicine, the safety, the abundance of food, mixed with real concern at the isolation, the physical stillness, the strange disconnect between daily effort and daily meaning. Our prehistoric visitor might walk away thinking we solved the hardest problems: hunger, disease, physical danger, and somehow created a whole new set of problems nobody saw coming. Problems of disconnection instead of scarcity. Problems of stillness instead of exhaustion. Not worse, necessarily. Just different, and in some ways, harder to name because there's no predator to point to, no famine to blame. Just a quiet ache that a person from 40,000 years ago might spot in an instant, simply because they'd know exactly what a group of humans is supposed to feel like, and they'd notice, almost immediately, that something about ours doesn't quite match. If this kind of side-by-side between the ancient mind and modern life gets you thinking, that's exactly the world we explore here on Prehistoric People, and there's a lot more of it coming. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because next time we're going even further back into a question just as strange as this one. What daily habit kept our ancestors alive that we've completely abandoned, and what has it cost us since we let it go?